Hey guys, Fox here, and today we're going to be ranking all 8 United Football League quarterback rooms from worst to best heading into the 2025 season. That's right, I said in a video last week that we were still waiting on DC to get their third quarterback to do this video, and well, they did. So we are now able to do this video just like we did last year. We're going to be looking at every single quarterback room and ranking them from worst to best heading into the upcoming season. Now, before we get started with this ranking, I want to give a massive thank you to all of you as we just recently hit 1,000 subscribers just a couple days ago. It's a milestone that we've been hoping to hit soon, and we ended up hitting it much earlier than ever anticipated. Look, the channel has grown immensely since the UFL really started, once that whole merger announcement happened, and I want to give a huge thank you to all of you who've been a part of it, as we now have hit the massive 1K milestone, and now I guess it's on the road to 2K. So I want to thank all of you for that. And FYI, the giveaway community post will be coming out tomorrow on Saturday the 22nd at 2 p.m. It's going to last a full week, and it's going to end in a live stream, which is going to be a live stream Q&A giveaway, reveal all that. So check your community post tomorrow for that. Without further ado, let's get started with the ranking with number 8, the San Antonio Brahmas. Now, this ranking is just like last year, a sense that it is judged by the room as a whole, with the starter and the projected starters as two subcategories as well. Of course, starter means more. So why are the Brahmas at 8? They're backups. And you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who thinks that there's a team in the league that has worse backups than the San Antonio Brahmas. Look, this is coming from a guy who usually likes having guys that are known guys we've seen play spring ball, but we did see both these guys in Garantano and Hogan play last year, hence why they're at 8. Look, Kellen Mond as a starter is a huge wild card. He's somebody who was a high draft pick. He was a third-round pick, but he really didn't do anything in the NFL level. Now, unlike somebody like a Matt Corral, where at the end of the day, a huge part of that was injury, Kellen Mond had issues with the coaching staff there. He ended up leaving after his first year there. Then he went to Cleveland, did nothing. He never really did anything anywhere else. That's not a good thing. But at the same time, he is a hometown guy, right? This is somebody who was from San Antonio, played at A&M, so he's coming back to San Antonio. So it's a good story there. The issue, though, is that in terms of the highly anticipated prospects, I think a lot of UFL fans would say he's probably third on that list. Some would argue he's first, some would argue he's fourth. I think he's probably around third or second. The fact is that he's not somebody who we're anticipating to be a top-tier quarterback. And so when you pair that with Kevin Hogan and Jarrett Garantano as your backups, it's not great. Look, Garantano's stats may not, in a vacuum, look horrific. You need to understand that if you weren't here heading into the last year, Garantano had negative hype. Bro was getting just flamed on every single Roughnecks post saying this is going to be a terrible situation for them. It's going to be a bad quarterback. He ended up not even reaching expectations. He was worse than expected, which was already not high. When he ended up, having Sinnett replace him, Sinnett didn't even look all that great, and he was still better than Garantano. Then Henderson came in and looked better than both of them. Kevin Hogan played like 2 drives. Now look, if you're talking about the very end of last year, and you were to tell a Brahmas fan that Quentin Dorbay and Chase Garbers wouldn't be on your team, you would think you upgraded. Because Garbers, for how well he played at the beginning of the season, he absolutely just fumbled that championship. He didn't even try. So you're glad he's gone. Dormade, he was what some people thought he was going to be. Somebody that would give you a good game, and then that was it. That's exactly what he was. Here's the issue, though. You would want either of those two guys if you were getting Garbers in the first half of the season. Of course, that championship game performance was horrific. Bro didn't even try. But the point is, heading into the season, this is definitely a downgrade. Look, Chase Garbers, the beginning of the year, was a very efficient quarterback, and then Quentin Dormade at least did give you a good game. Garantano and Hogan, I don't know if you can really expect a great game from them, like either of them. You can maybe get a couple drives, and that's it. So a lot of this rests on the shoulders of Kellen Mond, which again is why this team is at 8. This is the one team that I feel like only has one starter on them. And I'm saying even a lower tier starter, they just have one. Every other team, even if it's a lower tier guy, has at least 2 guys that you could realistically see start games and win. Brahmas have one, and that's Kellen Mond. So if he doesn't pan out, that's bad. And again, he's not the only highly touted prospect. Yes, I know other guys weren't as high a draft pick as him, but a lot of those other guys lasted in the NFL for either as long, longer, or were better than him in college kind of deal. You know what I mean? Number 8's the Brahmas. This really isn't a hot take. This is probably the second or third. No, this is the third easiest ranking in the entire list. Now, the next 4 were all pretty close, but I decided to put number 7, the Showboats. Now, some people are going to be kind of confused at this because the Showboats, all three of these guys are returning quarterbacks, and I had all three of them in my top 10 returning QB video. One important thing to note about that video is once you got past the top three, I felt there was a huge fall off. The top three guys in that video are legit starters that can win you a championship game. Beyond that are guys that are either can be on a team that wins a championship as the starting quarterback but aren't going to win you said game, or guys that really aren't going to win you a game. Now, E.J. Perry was in that top 5 in the borderline 4/5 spot. Even though I think that they're pretty comparable, I think I'd rather have Henderson. The main thing, though, is that all three of these guys, judging from last year, isn't incredible. Look, both T-Will and Dormady were turnover machines. Now, yes, the Showboats get a massive sigh of relief. The fact that, the great player they traded away ended up retiring, so they basically gave up nothing for Dormady, instead of giving up Ferguson, which if he had played would have been really bad. Look, Dormady and T-Will are not going to win you a championship. When you combine how T-Will looked behind that terrible offensive line, as well as the fact that the championship game performance in 2023 was not great with the Maulers, can't really see him as a championship quarterback as your starter. Now, E.J. Perry, we could. The fact is he's a kind of like a mini Justin Herbert in the sense that he's like the if man of the UFL, if he's healthy, if he plays a full season, if things go his way right, if he had time to prepare right. In 2023, the Panthers, he signed and then played like a week later and then got into a playoff game, played well, they lost. People are saying, imagine what he could be if he had a training camp. Then 2023 happened. He was very meh that first couple of games. He ended up, getting hurt. We saw Danny Etling come in and play respectable. Perry would come back, didn't do a ton. The fact is that he ended up being not the best quarterback on Michigan. So now it's another if situation, if he works out here. And then Dormady, I've never been a huge fan of him. I said it last year before the season. I said Dormady was kind of overrated despite not even being rated that high, and I stand by it. Again, I do also stand by the fact these are 3 of the top 10 best returning quarterbacks. I will also say that's not saying a ton when like 5 of those guys didn't really see the field at all or were, Jarrett Garantano, and then the guys above them, you only had a few that were really higher than them. And the biggest thing is that, well, yes, some people are going to say, well, what about DC? You had Teamu ranked lower than E.J. Perry, so shouldn't DC be lower? No, because I actually think that DC has the benefit of guys that haven't played before. Yes, I normally prefer guys that have played in spring football, but when you come talking about the quarterback position, especially with these kind of quarterbacks, we know what we have in these 3 guys. Whereas with the guys DC have, which we'll get to later, there's potential for them to be much better than any of these 3 quarterbacks, hence why DC is higher on the list, Showboats at 7. Now, number 6 is going to be the Battlehawks. This and 5 was really close. Really, this 5 and 4. Like, yes, 7 was a debatable one, but 6 to 4 were like neck and neck, like this in terms of closeness. Put 6 as the Battlehawks. Now, I know Battlehawks fans might be upset about this, but when you stop to think about it, you kind of realize why. They're not one of the 3 teams that has a returning quarterback that we expect to be great. So, already they're ineligible for the top 3 spots, pretty much. Then it comes to 4, 5, and 6. 4 and 5 both have a returning quarterback that, well, granted, I'm not the biggest Teamu fan, they both have a starting quarterback who legitimately has shown he can win games. The Battlehawks don't. The Battlehawks returning quarterback is a very raw player in Manny Wilkins. Incredible runner. Bro was inaccurate. Yes, I've talked about it before. 3 interceptions is a bit, jarring, but really it's not as bad as it looks. They were all at the very end of the Renegades game. Yes, they were still within reach for 2 of them, but they were all at the end of the game. The point is, though, he was insanely inaccurate. He's not somebody that looked like he was ready to be a pro quarterback at the UFL level as a consistent starter. As like a spot starter or Lindsey Scott type of player, granted, I really would love to see Lindsey Scott play, that he could work. So already in that regard, they take a massive hit compared to the other 2 teams that are after them, as they don't have that starter that played last year that's back that we know can be great. So then you have Max Duggan and Chavin Cordero. Now, Max Duggan, of course, had that great year with TCU. He won a bunch of awards, got into a national championship game, which I feel like everybody kind of forgets about that. They got to the championship game. Yes, they got absolutely annihilated by Georgia. Literally just destroyed, but they got there. At the same time, though, that was his only really insane season. Now, he still had a good couple of seasons before that with, similar stats in, accuracy and all that. Passer rating was similar. But overall, I think a big thing is what happened with the Chargers, right? Luis Perez came in and beat him for the job despite Duggan having already been there. Yes, I know they had a coaching change, got Jim Harbaugh and all that, but the point is, you had a guy that was already there that had chemistry with the team, players and all that, even if it's not a ton, and you had a guy come in Luis Perez, who ended up playing significantly better than him during the preseason and got Duggan cut pretty quickly. That's not a good sign when you have another UFL quarterback who's elite who was just thoroughly better than you. Then, of course, Chavin Cordero didn't play at the biggest of schools. He played at Hawaii and San Jose State, so he wasn't playing at those, big Power 5-esque schools, or Power 4, Power 5 for, a lot of these guys played, obviously, the Power 5 era. So, there's a bit of question there, especially considering the fact that he's not like somebody like we'll get to with DC, who played at a much lower level but dominated in that level. This is somebody who just played really well at a lower level. So it's just one of those things where it's a lot of hope with these guys being good. It's hope that Duggan ends up playing well. It's hope that Cordero plays good. But again, I have him above Memphis because I do think the fact you have potential here. You have potential to see Duggan or Cordero end up being a really good quarterback at this level. Will they? It's a tough question. Max Duggan was a guy that a lot of people were saying wasn't really going to make it in the pros, and he ended up proving him right. Now, will he work in the UFL level? We'll see. It's going to be interesting to see. And then Cordero, again, interesting to see. I know some of you might be a bit shocked at this, but when you think about it, especially when you go back to the fact that you don't have a guaranteed starter that played well last year, you do have at least somebody who either has a ton of experience or looked really good, like you do at the 5 and 4 spots, with number 5 being an example of the DC Defenders. Now, yes, I am a guy who is not a firm believer in Te'amu as a championship quarterback, and that, I mean winning you it. Again, I think he's good enough to be on a team that wins a championship. They got to a title game with Aaron Smith in 2023. But again, it's like when you look at somebody like a Joe Burrow versus a Jared Goff. Jared Goff is not winning you a championship game, but he can be the quarterback of a championship winning team. Joe Burrow, even though he hasn't yet, we've seen he can win you a championship game. He willed that team that had no offensive line to the Super Bowl. So that's the one thing I'm not a huge fan of. Te'amu is a turnover machine. Look, you can make any excuse you want. When 2 of the past 3 seasons of spring football, you have led the league in interceptions thrown, that is not a good thing, and that is borderline inexcusable. DC, I've talked about it before, really shot themselves in the foot last year. They should have sat Te'amu at least week 9 to see what they had in Jalen McClendon. Instead, they didn't, so they don't necessarily know what they just gave up with him. But in terms of their backups, this is the most interesting in the entire league. Because you have 2 guys that are very much about potential in a lot of ways. What could they do? I know they're not the only team like this, but they're one that's really like this. Them and Arlington are really interesting backups. So DC, you have Mike DeLillo. Now, he ended up playing at lower-end schools. Again, he played like Austin Peay State University in Texas. So not a big school like at all, an FCS school. But he was really solid there. Now, he wasn't absurdly dominant like another quarterback we'll get to later at a lower level, but he was still really solid there. And I think the more important fact is that is somebody that it's very interesting to see what he's going to end up being. Now, as for Spencer Sanders, he's going to be very questionable as well. Now, if you were watching college football the past 5 years, you remember there was like that 2-3 year window where Oklahoma State actually looked really solid at times. He was the quarterback of that team. That's where you remember him from. Of course, the 2021 season where they went 11-2 with him as a starter is, of course, the big season. Now, even at the college level, he was throwing more interceptions than a lot of other great college quarterbacks were. But he still had a lot of potential that was shown there. I would say that in those big 4-esque prospects who played at like bigger colleges, I'd say he's probably like 3 or 4. I mean, I'd say but his potential is higher. It's weird. I think that if you were to say everything works out, I think Sanders would be better than Duggan, but I think their floor, Duggan is better than Sanders. Sanders, I think, has a wider range of what he could do, but it's a matter of can he. And again, DC has the issue that Te'amu just never sits. It happened with Tampa Bay in 2022. It happened with DC last year. You're not going to really be able to see how the other 2 guys play unless you end up benching him where he plays bad enough to warrant a benching, which kind of did last year. But I don't know. DC's a weird one in terms of your backups, but in terms of just objectively speaking, they have 2 backups that pretty much aren't as highly rated as prospects compared to St. Louis, but they have a starter that, for how much I'm not a huge fan of him, he's much better than having Manny Wilkins as your returning quarterback. So Number 5, DC. Number 4 is going to be Houston. Yeah, this was probably one of the biggest shockers to some people, but honestly, when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Number 1, Nolan Henderson is probably going to be your backup, and I legitimately think he's probably the 4th best returning quarterback in terms of the fact that he showed a lot of potential. He was the 2nd best of those potential guys from last year in the UFL, which we all know the best one of those one was. But Nolan Henderson, in the limited time he played with Houston, looked far better than Sinet or Garantano. Now, some might say that's not saying a lot, but again, that team really wasn't good last year, and he actually looked solid. Again, his stats were pretty damn good considering what he was playing with. Yes, he had an incredible receiver, Justin Hall, but overall, when you look at how Sinet and Garantano didn't play really well with him, 531 yards, 2 TDs, 1 interception, 1 rushing touchdown. Did have the fumble loss, but he had 140 yards on the ground, so he had over 600 yards, pretty much basically 700 yards in only 2 starts and a couple other games which he appeared in. Then Jalen McClendon. I still think DC missed us. I still think McClendon has a lot of potential. The fact is, what he did in those 4 games with Vegas is insanely impressive. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The hype that was given to Dormady should have been given to McClendon. McClendon was on a worse team than Dormady was and put up, I would say, better stats and looked better. What he did with Vegas was insanely impressive when you consider how not great Perez looked and then looked at what he did with Arlington, right? McClendon has shown a lot of potential. I think that DC really failed by not giving him a legit chance to play as a starter. And I think that that's Houston's game. Then Houston still has a prospect quarterback in Anthony Brown Jr. Now, Anthony Brown Jr., of course, his best season was his last year he played in college at Oregon. He's been in the NFL, bounced around teams and all that. But his last year at Oregon, went 10-4. He had that almost 3K yard season, 19-7, and TD interception, had 9 on the ground. Again, not the most insane TD interception ratio passing-wise, but had 9 on the ground and had another 650 yards rushing. So another dual threat potential quarterback. Again, an older guy, was in college for a while. You know, he had the redshirt year, or he had the DNP years first year, ended up playing 5 full years of college, been in the NFL a bit, so he's an older prospect quarterback, which honestly might work out well for him. A lot of people are very hyped about him, and I'd say that the hype now is more to him than it was to Max Duggan. Now, I know some of that's just recency bias, of course, but there's a lot of hype behind him. That's why we expect him to be the starter, not Henderson, despite the fact that Henderson really should be a starter in this league this year. But number 4, Houston, I don't think this really should be a huge one. The more I thought about it, the more this was clearly the best of those really 3 close ones, so Houston number 4. Now, these next 3 are going to be a bit quicker because they're more obvious. Number 3 is the Michigan Panthers. This is mainly because of the fact that you have Bryce Perkins as your starter. Now, yes, he only appeared in a couple of games. Yes, he technically was like 4 of them, but he really only played in like 2 of them. But in those 2, he looked unbelievable. Now, as I said before, he really threw 2 interceptions. One of those should have been picked. CLC Mariner made an unfathomably great play to rip the ball out of a Houston defender's hands. But even with that, he still looked insane. Even if you give him that interception, he still had 4 TDs, 2 interceptions, again, in like the first 2 games he played at the UFL level, and he put up absurd numbers. 180 yards rushing. Again, he played less than Nolan Henderson did and put up more rushing yards. And then his passing yards was 343 compared to the... It's just... He was what Battlehawks fans were hoping Manny Wilkins would be. He ended up being that in the time he played. He looked incredible. Again, there's a lot of what-ifs with the Panthers season regarding injury, but some people would say that if he was healthy in that playoff game against Birmingham, we would have a different champion. So, going to be very interesting to see. Now, another thing is the fact that Danny Etling is a solid backup. Now, that's what I would say. He's a solid backup. As a backup, he's solid. As a starter, there's a reason I had him below Quinton Dormady and Troy Williams on my ranking. But he still is somebody who, if he has to start, is going to do good enough. The biggest difference with him versus like T. Will and Quinton Dormady, his floor... Okay, granted he had the terrible playoff game, but normally his floor is higher than guys like Dormady and T. Will versus his ceiling being lower. He's a very, like this kind of quarterback when normally quarterbacks are like this. Normally quarterbacks have a wide range of how good or bad they can play. Etling is Danny Etling. He's going to play okay. He's going to do decent. He'll give you a good half, then a bad half, like he did in the playoff game. He'll give you one solid, mediocre game. As a spot starter, that's completely fine. And it's a huge reason why the Panthers ended up winning so many games last year. He was a very serviceable and respectable starter. He wasn't great, but he was good enough. He wasn't doing things which would make you lose games like a Quentin Dormady would by throwing interceptions. He only threw 2. Now he only had 3 passing touchdowns, and again, that's why I'm saying he's a okay quarterback. Then you do have your prospect, and will be probably the least hyped of all these big college guys in Rocky Lombardi. He played at Michigan State, Northern Illinois, of course, Big Ten Michigan State. It's a huge reason why he's here, is because Michigan State, obviously. So there's a lot of hype there. And then, of course, what he did at Northern Illinois, he was solid. He wasn't insane by any stretch of the word. His stats are not eye-popping, of course. When you have 11 TDs, 7 interceptions, that's not great. Again, not really a ton. He's mainly here for the Michigan thing. Michigan just comes in at 3 because they have one of the 3 best starters in the league to most people. Granted, I think that it's safe to say he's the 4th best quarterback in the league at best, but we'll get to that when we get to the number 1 spot, which we all know who that is. Number 2 is the Arlington Renegades. Again, should not shock a single person. Luis Perez is your starting quarterback. He is, at worst, the 2nd best quarterback in this league. At best, he's the best. I think that if you don't put him top 2, you're just being a hater to Luis Perez, okay? The dude balled out last year. He was what people thought McCarron was going to do, but he did it with a receiving core that was not expected to be as good as the Battlehawks and ended up making a receiving core that was insane, okay? 2,300 passing yards, 18 TDs, 4 interceptions, a 99 passer rating. Just stupid numbers. Like, yes, he didn't run the ball at all. He didn't need to. He was an incredible passer. I'm not going to talk about him again. It's like it's just beating a dead horse. We know how good he is. We know he's insane. And then you have Holton Ahlers. Now, Holton is one of those guys who is a big question mark because of the fact that we didn't see him play last year, but he is somebody that does have hype. Look, those are his stats. All you need to know is he pretty much holds every ECU record, and he did held or still holds every single AAC record. Just insane stat-wise for a career. And yes, his last season was just insane. 28-5 TD interception ratio. Now that's a dominant college stat line. 6 TDs rushing, a good running quarterback, but not one who has to rely on it. Just, again, stupid stats, obvious. Then you have Luke Lennon. Now, Luke, of course, is the Division III, I don't even know what the best way to describe him is. The dude only lost 2 games in Division III. And if I remember correctly, they were both championship games. He has won the championship in 2 of the 4 years he played, and he lost it in the other 2. That's how dominant he's been. Yes, is this Division III football? 100%. Was he the best player in it? By a country mile. He has Division III records for most career touchdowns responsible. Look at his stats. The guy averaged over 3K yards a season passing and did average over 800 a season rushing. He was averaging stupid numbers. He was averaging close to 4K yards a season at D3. Touchdowns, interceptions, get past his rookie season where he threw 10 or his freshman year. The guy was consistently having close to 60 touchdowns a season with less than 10 interceptions thrown. Yes, I get it. It's D3. But it comes to a point where you're dominating to an extent where it's like there's legit hype. There is hype behind Luke Lennon. Despite the fact that he played at D3, again, very low level of college compared to an FCS or obviously FBS level. But he dominated in such a way where it's going to be interesting to see with this team. Again, it's like when you see guys at NDSU go to the NFL, like Carson Wentz. I know, bad example. Trey Lance, bad example. But guys like that, right? You're putting a guy onto a team that now is going to be more talented. Look, the biggest difference from UFL versus college teams is depending on what college team you play for, some people say that talent-wise, a college team is better. You're talking about a team or a guy now that's going to go to a UFL team and have better talent around him. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how he translates to it. This is the single most interesting prospect of all these quarterbacks. Because there's a world where he plays and he looks horrid. He pulls a Nathan Peterman half, throws 5 interceptions, never plays again. Or he's going to absolutely dominate and pull like a Kurt Warner stat line. He's just going to show up out of nowhere and dominate. The sky's the limit, and the floor can't be low enough. It'll be very interesting to see how good Luke Lennon is at the UFL level. I believe he is the only current a quarterback that is technically draft eligible, though he ain't going to get drafted. But who knows? Maybe he plays well in the UFL the first few weeks. But number 2. Now, number 1 is the Birmingham Stallions. Do I really need to talk about this team at all? Why they're number 1? Alex Magoo is one of the 2 best quarterbacks in the league. The last time we saw him play, he was annihilating defenses in the 2023 USFL. People can make all the excuses they want. He dominated in an insane level. He had 2,500 yards in those 10 games. He put 25 TDs to 7 turnovers. His playoff stats were even better. Matt Corral wasn't all that great in the regular season. He was good. The playoff game, he saved the Stallions season. Yes, he threw the interception early. He went 9 of 11 for 2 TDs and that 1 interception for 120 yards. And most of the Stallions' points came from him in that second half. So he is a huge reason the team ended up doing what they did. He knows this team. And again, he still had times where he looked solid, just not incredible last year. So, and that's the regular season, so great there. And J.R. Smith, how good is he still, health-wise, all that? Don't know. He hasn't played in a year. He hasn't played since week 1, really, the 2023 season. But he's been on the team for all 3 championships. He led them to the championship in the first game. Yes, he got hurt in the big game, but he led them to it. And he has looked really good at times. There was a time where he was a probable MVP winner. Then he got sick, injured, minor injuries in the second half. Kind of played worse in the 2022 season, but don't even know. But as a third stringer, that's pretty damn good. Look, yes, this team doesn't have anyone who is considered a prospect, but they don't need it. Okay, they have Alex Magoo and Matt Corral. As a 1-2 punch of guys we know how good they are, that's pretty damn incredible. So number 1 being the Stallions shouldn't be a shock. So that'll do it. This has been ZomFox. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on this list. Do you agree or disagree with some of them? I know some might be a bit of a hot take, but I think that overall this is one where the more I step back to look at it, the more I like this list. I was, debating some of the spots at first, but the longer I look at it, the more I think this list is actually pretty solid. So again, if you would change anything, let me know down below. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell if you've enjoyed this video. Again, we hit 1,000 subscribers, and now we're on the way to, I guess, 2K. I guess the first goal should be 1,500, though. Again, I will be having the community post for the giveaway come out tomorrow. It's going to last a full week, and it's going to have the rules in it. You got to have Instagram or Twitter to end up being entered in it, or to win the prize, I should say. So make sure you have that. If you've been a fan of the channel for a while, I think I might become a community member for as low as 99 cents a month to get an exclusive monthly video to members. You get thumbnails ahead of time to find out what videos are coming out. You get team emojis, a lot of other stuff. And as always, guys, have a great night.